A few years after you were in my class, Karina, I taught a new class. It was called English as a Global Language. And because I was really interested in how many varieties of English there are all around the world, and why if somebody is from Nigeria and they come to the US to go to college and somebody tells them, oh, well, you need an ESL class. I'm like, what? No, English is this person's primary language, for God's sake. So what are the ideologies that are there's a hierarchy of varieties of English.
I'm Karina Monneran, and welcome to Her Salti Words. Welcome back. I'm so glad to hang out with you again on this episode, which should have been the inaugural episode, but unfortunately the tech gods were like, Karina, no, you need to learn and you need to improve, and so we must present multiple technology challenges that will prevent you from posting this episode. And I was like, no, I refuse to take these challenges, and I will not stumble. Nope. But then I stumbled and I'm like, no, I'm not going to go on this hero's journey. And then, this dragon came and I'm like, stop it. No. And I'm slaying and I'm just fighting and kicking and screaming. And then in the end, I'm like, listen, dragon, you're stronger than me. Let's just be friends. Yeah. Let's just hang out, man. It's all good. It's good. Help me through this. So me and the dragon were like, we got this, and we totally slayed it. So here we are. And you'll notice that the audio version of Her Salti Words is just a little bit different than the YouTube version, and it's because for some reason when the camera turns on, so does my self-deprecating brain. And it starts pulling out all of these conditioned voices that try to make me stumble. Haha, continue stumbling. So it results in, I was just doing take after take of me trying to get it just perfect and right. And the one that ended up making the final cut, it was the last one and I chose to go with it. And I still don't think it's good enough because it still pops up each time I look at it. There's that portion right after the opening song, which I really like the opening song. I did a new version video to it, and I just had so much fun filming it and putting it all together. But then it leads in that strong into hi, how are you? It's very meek and very welcome back. And each time I listen to it, I'm just like eye roll, but you know what? I'm not going to change it. It's a part of me. Those moments of, where one particular portion of the episode is really strong and good, and then the other portions might not be as good. It's just part of the flavor. And it's part of my own journey too, because depending on the moment, I can look and come across strong and confident, or in the next breath, I'm just withering into a fig of insecurity. And still other times, I've got this face that sometimes is really serious when I'm just kind of walking around or really concentrated. It's a really just lovely thing called resting bitch face. And sometimes it's so strong that when someone's walking by me, they they're concentrating, all of a sudden they look up at me, and then I must be thinking, because their eyes all of a sudden turn into this wide horror look, like they've seen something, aghast, and they become fearful and they quickly dart away, and then they're talking to everyone, don't go by her, she's gonna take you hostage with her eyes, and it just becomes this whole thing. But what can you do? But seriously though, this is just what I have to journey through, and it's just my own thing that I'm trying to figure out, and I'm making it work. I'm just move forward. So let's shift back to this episode, and my amazing guest, Dr. Gail Shuck. Like I mentioned a couple of seconds ago, Dr. Gail was my very first guest, and I was so excited that she said yes. I am literally beaming the entire episode. You can see it, the one on YouTube anyway, and you might even be able to hear it in my voice too on the audio version. But Dr. Gail is an associate professor at Boise State. She received a Bachelor of Arts in Anthropology from Oberlin College. She then pursued a PhD in second language acquisition and teaching from the University of Arizona. Dr. Gail loves language and is so passionate about working with refugees on their journey in learning the English language, as well as making sure the ESL students and refugees are supported in the classroom as they navigate learning English. I met Dr. Gail when I took a course from her at Boise State while I was pursuing my undergrad in secondary ed English teaching. She totally captured my attention with how well she spoke and how she articulated her in-depth knowledge of language. She was and is such an amazing human with an energy that makes you just want to listen to her speak for hours. And luckily, this episode really allows you to she's just got so many good nuggets. Now, I know that each podcast is on the longer side, and that's something I'm looking at and, I'm continuing to fine tune. But in the meantime, I am just not willing to give up those good parts from these awesome women. And I promise it's worth your time. So just hang in there with us. Yeah. So let's jump in. Let's learn a few things about language.
Help me welcome Dr. Gail Shuck. Hi, Dr.
You
Gail.
are too sweet. Oh my God. You know that you could have come up to me anytime after class and said, hey, I just want to, and you could have used an excuse if you wanted, or you could have just said, I just want to talk to you more about this. Can we just sit down sometime? I would have said yes.
Totally.
Right?
I believe it. Totally. And I know you would have. And I think it was just because, just that shyness and insecurity. And, I didn't have the confidence then.
Yeah.
But
I can understand it's hard.
Many years later, and now in my 40s, yay.
Woo. It's funny. 40 was the year that so much changed for me. Yeah. That was the year I got divorced, and I had to navigate kind of what does it mean to be, co-parenting this child because Noah's dad lives across town. But also, can I survive financially? Can I handle Noah by myself if I don't have their dad, nearby to say, like right in the house, to say anything? 40 changed everything. And it turns out 40 was just one of the best years, and I wouldn't have thought that when I was in my 20s, but here I am. So actually I'm way beyond 40 now, but welcome to the 40s. And, I've said goodbye to them already, but whatever.
Well, I wouldn't have thought at all.
Oh, it's been a while since I said goodbye.
Well, I'm with you there that the 40s are really a beautiful decade in entering. Mm-hmm. I've been in the 40s for a few years now. And so I am really enjoying it, even though my body's changing and different things are happening. I think the experience of leading up to 40 just has allowed me that preparation of going with the flow with it and really that self-acceptance of, hey, my body has gone through a lot all of these years, and I've put it through some really, hardcore doo-doo, and, it's hanging in there with me. And so, it's just appreciating it, and it's going
That's
through.
Great. I know.
For sure.
It's great. Yeah. Yeah. I've found that too. Just getting older in general has also just made me think, it's not always true. I'm going to sound braver than I really am. But a lot of the time I just think, whatever. I would use the F word if I knew more about who you're imagining as your audience, but I would be like, forget it,
No, please do. I encourage you to use all those, I call it like cheesecake words, because they're so delicious sometimes when you say them.
Right.
And then my picture also has, and I'll start it off with it. I'm a ray of fucking sunshine. I love
awesome.
that.
Okay, there we go. So thank you for that permission. Sometimes I want to say, fuck it. This is who I am. I can yell at people, or, that's not who I am typically, but I can accept certain things about myself and then just be okay with who I am. I like myself more now than I did, say, when I was in my 20s or even 30s. It's kind of terrible how long it takes for some of us. I still have imposter syndrome when the semester's starting and I go into some kind of a meltdown before the semester starts. Like, I can't do this. Why am I a teacher? Or whatever.
I love the way you're saying it. I love it because I understand. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. So, but it's interesting. I question my ability to do things like that, even though I sort of dive into the I'm terrible at this, I have no business doing this moment. I come out of it more quickly and much more quickly now. And for so many reasons, I also have realized how much people matter to me, and, forming relationships, maintaining those relationships. And it's also part of the work I do too. So it's funny. I don't think I was very conscious of that earlier in my life. But in the last 10 or so years, I've really felt like, that's what matters. If I don't get all my work done, whatever. If I have a crappy semester, whatever. But if I have made people feel like they matter, and I feel like I matter when I'm talking to them, that's the thing. That's everything. To me, that's everything.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree. And what I'm hearing is that giving yourself that permission of things not being okay, and that's okay. You can, and then it's okay if it takes a while to come out. It's okay, like you said, if the semester doesn't go, it's kind of like that self-partnering too. You're partnering with yourself and saying, hey, you got this, but it's a little bit rough right now and things are sucky. So being able to acknowledge that without that conditioning of trying to convince yourself like, no, don't feel that way, or
right.
Which seems like is a large part of the 20 and 30s, trying to teach ourselves that, but then unbreak it too, like unteach it. Like we're taught, there's that conditioning and then that unconditioning that we seem to realize deeper in our 30s, especially because it's like something inside says, Gail, that's enough. Like,
right. And you're awesome. You can't be good at everything. Stop trying to seem like you're great at everything, because you're not going to be, but it also, it's interesting too. I had a semester a couple of years ago. Yeah, I guess a couple of years ago this spring, when I was teaching a class called The Politics of Language. And it's one of my favorite classes to teach, honestly. I just love it. But that semester, I was really wrestling with something. And that was that the previous time I had taught it was the year that Donald Trump was on the campaign trail. Oh. And it was, there's so much to talk about. There's so much stuff that is about how language creates insider-outsider kinds of, groups, and how, he particularly, but also people in his circle, are able to just put people down and, create this white supremacy, which is really what it is.
Yes.
This sense without saying, I believe white people are better than everyone. So the fact that he started with, they're sending their worst people, like Mexicans and rapists, and like that stuff was so obvious to many of us, but it wasn't obvious to everyone. And so I thought, well, this is a perfect opportunity. This is the course where you would look at that kind of thing. Yeah. But at the end of the semester, I got a couple of comments on my course evaluations from students who thought I was just anti-Republican. Like, no, I'm anti-white supremacy.
Right.
And that's what Donald Trump is. He's not the picture of, like, I see a Bob Dole or, a George Bush as senior or junior, as sort of classic Republicans, I guess. I'm not necessarily I didn't love it when they were president, but I don't know. I was just sort of like, all right, I'm going to avoid that conflict. I'm not going to do that again. So when Donald Trump was still president, which is terrible because, of course, the opportunity to use a class for saying, let's wrestle with this conflict. I have this conflict going on. But no, I just wanted to avoid it. So 2 years later, when I taught the class again, I thought, I'm going to avoid all that stuff by focusing really on beliefs about language, which is language ideologies. And I thought, I'm going to zero in on language ideologies, and that will allow more specific kinds of research projects. It'll allow us to talk about how race really does play a role in language ideologies, but also it'll give me the opportunity to create an assignment, which is one of my favorite assignments now. It's called The Autobiography of a Language Ideology. So,
I'm so sorry. No. Stay. Hold on just a second. My screen just. I'm trying to get back my screen. I can still hear you. And
okay.
So give me just 2 shakes. Here we go. Here. Let's do that. Forgive me. Forgive me. Yeah.
No.
Okay. Oh, there you go. Oh my gosh, that scared me so much. I could hear you. Okay.
So I'm back.
Yes, you're back. Everything is good. We're still good. Oh, thank you. And
yeah, not at all.
And you were saying.
Well, so I was. I developed for that class an assignment that I call the autobiography of a language ideology, where it's a personal essay about a belief about language that seems to conflict with another belief about language that you think you hold. So one of the things that I was, my example was I went to Ireland. I was lucky enough to go to Ireland 2 years ago, and I was charmed by Irish accents, and I wanted to imitate them, and I wanted to hear them, and I wanted to talk to people about them. Like I did actually ask a cashier who was selling me a ticket to a museum. He said, "Thanks." And I thought, wait a minute, I've heard servers in restaurants say "tanks," as in tanks a million, right?
I love that, yeah.
But he said "thanks," and I said, wait a minute. Okay, who says tanks and who says thanks? How do you know the difference? And so he and I got into this really great conversation. Well, in my class, I was thinking, why am I fascinated with Irish accents? But I lived in Japan for 6 years, and I'm not as fascinated and charmed by Japanese accents. What's going on there? And so I had to sort of wrestle with this sense that European accents are better somehow. I mean, of course, consciously, I would never think that, but that has to be part of why it is that Irish accents seem, and maybe it's because it's Irish accents are one variety of English accents. So when I hear Kenyan accents, for example, I'm similarly charmed. So maybe there's something about native English speakers and their accents as opposed to non-native English speakers who I just want to correct. You know?
Right.
So anyway, so I had to wrestle with that. Well, what's really interesting is race plays so big a part of our language ideologies about what correctness even means, whose ways of using language are not appropriate in classrooms, in workplaces, whatever. It tends to be people of color and people of lower socioeconomic classes, right? So race and class are so embedded in people's beliefs about what correctness is that race came up all the time. And we had one biracial guy in that class. We had 2 students from Mexico, originally born in Mexico. We had 1 student originally from Vietnam. And then we had a 4th generation Japanese American student who grew up in Boise and really just identified with her white friends and never saw herself as having a race at all or a racial, because she doesn't speak Japanese, or at least much. Her parents don't speak it. And so she gave this incredibly moving presentation about her desire to separate from her Japanese heritage, but also be wrestling with that at the same time. And so it's really weird how my desire to avoid conflict and focus in on language ideologies ended up with all of us being vulnerable and talking about race in ways that we had to say, okay, wait a minute. Like the biracial guy said, sometimes I like going downtown and going to the farmer's market and watching all the white people on weekends.
Oh, wow. That's so awesome.
So, I know. It was awesome. But then another guy in the class said, wait a minute. Isn't that just as bad as saying, let's just like stare at Black people? Like, okay, then we have to wrestle with that. Why are those different? Are they different? I am arguing that they are, but what is the difference? What's at the heart of that? So I was willing to let down. Other people were willing to let down. And oh my God, that was one of the best classes I ever taught.
Oh, wow.
You know? And so it's that sense of vulnerability that makes me also say to a student last semester, you know, we were all on Zoom, and this student was just feeling really crappy that day and was on the video, the camera was on, and he had the blanket over his head and was lying down on the couch completely covered by the blanket. And I said, are you okay? And he's like, yeah, I don't feel like stuff today. I'm really worried that I'm going to have to take there's a pass option now. Because of the coronavirus, we are all struggling to just move everything online or move parts of it online and other parts not. And everybody's overwhelmed, students and faculty together. So the university has made allowances for that by saying, if you get a grade you don't like in a class after the end of the semester, within those first 5 days, you see your grade, just change it to a pass. You can go in, fill out a form, and you can take a pass rather than a B- or a pass rather than a C, or a pass rather than an A- if you don't want it ruining your GPA or whatever. You know. So the student said, I'm afraid I'm going to have to take passes in a couple of my classes. And I like zoom in, like I'm looking this close to the camera. I swear, I'm like, people, you know, like yelling at them, you know, fake yelling, right? But going, people, we're in a pandemic, for God's sake. There is a life-threatening illness out there. We have to give ourselves a break. Come on. You know, and then in the chat, because I love the chat on Zoom. I think it's really an interesting aspect of teaching online. But in the chat, he later said, I feel so much better. Thank you. I'm like, well, you know, that it doesn't feel like it's a lot to say, I care about you and I want you not to be down on yourself. But I think that it happens a lot more than like people who are saying, no, you have to have your video camera on. Like, why?
Yeah.
Obviously the idea of policing students and thinking that they're cheating is primary in those teachers' minds, I think.
Yes. A lack of distrust. It doesn't build trust between the student and the teacher.
Right. I know.
Wow.
Sorry, I can just always go on and on over here and on and on.
I love it.
Here.
Yes, I love it.
Meander.
Well, what you were talking about initially from that first class, it reminded me a little bit of the linguistic course I was in, the same. And we talked a little bit about that. I remember that. We talked a little bit about, and you just kind of brought it up, almost kind of like to put it out there to get feelers, in the class. And, I don't know if we were all numb, but not everybody was kind of responsive. We did our sort of presentations and that sort of thing, but it would have been nice to dive a little bit more deeper into it in that class. One thing I remember in that class was the word like. You were really, like was like something that you were fascinated with. And I was fascinated with it because ever since then, I think of like. I'm what, just kind of look at it and break it down a little bit, so it was just, and that was the first class where it was, when I wrote my paper, that compare and contrast, I did it easily. It was very difficult in all my other courses, but because of how coming at it in a language perspective, and then I was able to pull out specific parts of two articles and break it down, Fox News and I think CNN or New York Times or something. And how one lent itself maybe more democratic, and how they were each zeroing in for their base. And then I used that for my graduate. And
no kidding. Did you really?
I did. I kind of did another cleanup in there, made sure it was all, and I used it to enter as a graduate student. So I was very proud of that.
Awesome. Yeah. Oh, good for you. Congratulations. I love it.
But that's wonderful. How amazing that semester ended up being, and it sounds like you just took it in a different angle. You achieved what you wanted in that initial one. You just went about it in a different way. Right. And how unfortunate that those students who took offense to it, maybe took it a little bit personally, as if something, was intended to somehow change their mind, which is never the case. How unfortunate, because the learning opportunity was there, and it's about the language. It had nothing to do with, some things are byproducts of it, but the intent is always about, the language there. So that's a bummer that prevented that.
I know. It stuck with me, obviously, for those 2 years before I taught the class again. Yeah. And I remember just 2016 too was just a really tough, just all the way around anyway, and all the way into November, the night of it was. Yeah, no, that's right. And here we are still. I was going to say here we are again, but no, it's still.
It is. It kind of feels like we're almost like out the door, but like we're not quite,
We're not.
It's just so interesting, the ups and downs of it. And I don't know, makes you, hope we can. I know.
But then you can start to see how these things are systems, right? You can start to see how when someone says, I was going to say someone who shall remain nameless, but, so many of these someones do this. Yes. The media are the enemy of the people. The press is the enemy of the people. I mean, you can easily take that back to decades and decades and decades ago, and you can see how that foments a kind of like us and them sort of thing. And that's still happening today. And then you add to that the corporate nature of the way media operate. So you see some people trying to get viewers, and here's how they're going to try. And then you see advertising dollars go into those versus these over here. And then you get these separations based on what advertisers are giving more money to which stations. And that's just awful, so then all these things work together to create, land us where we are right now. And yeah, it's kind of frightening. The language plays a big role, but it's not the only thing.
It is a huge role. And it's going on that with the language. It makes me think of how it brought out those individuals that wanted to use language in the way that it's being used by that individual that shall remain nameless.
Right.
And so he was able to project and use the language in such a way. And the language is not even an evolved language. It's a very, very low. And here I am classifying it. Here I am saying, right? I'm saying the level
there's
of
a hierarchy, absolutely,
within that, and the level of the verbs that are used, and the nouns are very basic. You know what I mean?
But also sentences remain unfinished a lot of the time. And so it allows him to be able to say, no, I never said that. And because you take a transcript, it's hard to follow transcripts. But when you hear him talk, you can follow him. And then he can easily say, use deniability. It's plausible deniability. No, I never said that. No, I didn't say all people. Or no, I didn't say go kill Hillary Clinton. I just said, those First Amendment or Second Amendment people, whatever, you never know what they're going to do.
Yeah.
Like that, wait, what did you just say?
Right. You never know what they're going to do. Like, that's like the signal. You never know what they're going to do. They might go and do something.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's very interesting. And I have seen those people who you kind of knew maybe had a little bit of that in them. And then that language allowed them to then express that same language. So
that's
that came, out a little bit.
That's exactly right.
But
I know. What are you going to do?
I know, right? Let's do a couple other things that I'm kind of curious about too. And then I want to come back to, because I love the language part of it. So I still want to dive into that.
Sure.
So you're from Cincinnati.
I was born there. My dad was from there. My, he grew up there. And then when I was a toddler, I really don't remember I don't remember living there. I remember a back fire escape vaguely in my, my little tiny child memory. But no, we didn't really live there. My dad's brother, one of his two brothers, stayed there for the rest of his life, and never left. But really I only went there back, I guess, once when I was about 11 years old. Wow. And that was it. So mostly I feel like I'm from the Southwest because we moved from Cincinnati first to San Antonio, where we also didn't live very long, but then we went to Albuquerque and I stayed in Albuquerque for 7 years. Then my parents got divorced. Then we stayed in Albuquerque one more year when I was in 7th grade. So my 7th grade year, we were in Albuquerque. After that, we moved to Miami, Florida with my mom for 1 year. She hated the university where she was. I won't name it. I hated the department or whatever. So we lived in Miami for 1 year. And then we all moved to Arizona, where she got a job at Arizona State. And so we went to, suburban high school in Arizona. And then I left for college, and then I left the country.
Oh, wow.
And then when I came back 6 years later, I was then getting ready to start graduate school, and I decided to go to the University of Arizona. Partly because my mom knew people there, and she said, well, that would be a great place for you because so-and-so is there and so-and-so is there and so-and-so is there. And so I thought, okay, I didn't really know how one chooses a grad program. I chose a few. I applied to a few, and that one I got into. And so, so I lived in Tucson for a really long time because it took me a really long time to finish my PhD. So
good. And so I guess with taking it a bit to finish the PhD, was it just because you wanted to take like the courses and make sure you get that full experience, or
it's a good question. And I know why I did the PhD, but I never had any intention of doing one. My mom has a PhD, but it never occurred to me to go do that. I just didn't know what I was going to do when I finished college, and grad school wasn't an option for whatever reason. I just didn't I was thinking about your question about obstacles. Yeah. So one of those obstacles was just unwillingness or a fear or something, or a lack of knowledge about what advisors do. What are advisors for? I thought they were just supposed to be there to help you choose your classes. It never occurred to me to talk to my advisor in my major, who I loved. I took 3 classes from him. It never occurred to me to go sit and say, so what does one do with a degree in anthropology? It never even occurred to me to have those kinds of conversations. So now I have those conversations with my students all the time, and so I found a job, the story of which is really long, so I'm not going to go into it. I mean, there's a shorter version, but basically the job I found was teaching English in Malaysia.
Oh, wow.
And I know. I didn't really know where Malaysia was. And this friend said that she would go with me and apply with me. And she never ended up applying. She had other plans. And so I went to Malaysia 2 weeks after I graduated from college. I was barely 21 years old. Wow. And I was teaching in an academy that prepared Malaysian students for taking the TOEFL, which is test of English as a foreign language, which is basically an English proficiency test for admission to American colleges and universities.
Oh, wow.
So if you want to get into, if you're from a place where English is not the dominant language, then you have to take an English test to say, yes, I'm English proficient enough to be able to go to your university. So we have these admissions tests. And I had never heard of that exam. I had never heard of the field of ESL. I didn't even know what the acronym stood for. I knew nothing, like really nothing. It's just embarrassing how little I knew.
No, not at all. I mean, I feel like that allowed you to be open to go with all of it, everything that came with it. I guess
so. I guess I had no expectations really, other than it's going to be really hot. Yeah. That's all I knew. I didn't know that people used English as a commonly used language there. They use this phrase market English. They also use the phrase market Malay, because there's a Malaysian language called Malay, and it's related very closely to Indonesian. It's basically they're 2 varieties of the same language. But there are also Chinese and there are also Indians in Malaysia, and everybody speaks Malay to some degree. And most people speak English to some degree. And so I didn't even know that. I had no idea what I was getting into. So I did that for a year. And then I had a friend from college who was in Japan at the time, that same time I was in Malaysia. And we wrote letters back and forth to each other all the time. And so she said, if you get tired of Malaysia, Japan is hiring. I'm telling you, there are tons and tons and tons of English schools here. It won't be hard for you to find a job. So I thought, okay, I'll try that.
That's awesome.
So I tried that. And, my first job offer happened 4 days after I arrived. Wow. But I said no, because I'm glad I said no. I would have been living in a guest house in a very rich property owned by this family with 2 children. And I would be the nanny and English teacher living on the same property. what social circles would I have access to? Nothing but that one family.
Yeah.
What if I'm trapped? They'll have my visa, like no.
Very true. Very true. Smart thinking too, especially the social aspect. A part of it, like you definitely want that social circle so you can expand your experience there.
That's right. That's right. So, so I went to work at this other school, and the school itself was terrible, but like really terrible. It's still in existence. I've looked them up, and they have no understanding at all about what language teaching really means. It was a guy who had an MBA. And went back to Japan, which was his native country. And he went and got his MBA, went back and thought, I'll start an English school. And I know I'm going to record the students' tests at the end of each unit. Then the little recordings will go home with the student. The parents will think, listen to my child speaking English with this foreigner. Wow. And then they'll give me more money to send their children to continue. Oh, it was such a racket. And it still exists. And it still doesn't have any kind of pedagogy, any understanding of what teacher education means.
Well, of course, when the focus is on just the dollar.
That's it. That's it. Yeah, I know.
We already have experienced many different ways here when it happens to be on the business model of education.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. That was kind of my first, my first exposure, I guess, to what that looks like and why that's so gross. I maintained friendships after that with especially one of the people that she didn't even work there. She was dating one of the guys who worked there. And she and I became really, 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 really close. So, she and I were friends until sadly she passed away a few years ago. But at least I expanded my social circle some. I just knew I didn't want that stupid school to completely sour my experience on Japan. So I thought, I'm going to look for a different job here. The different job was just a dream. It was a dream. I worked for the Sony Corporation, which had all these little companies that, there was a Sony language lab, a languages school. There was a Sony travel agency. There was a Sony health club. And if you were a Sony employee, then you would get discounts at any one of those kinds of places. So I had a lot of Sony employees who were my students. But that was a really wonderful place where I had, good friends, and I even made friends with my students because they were all adults, and some of them were older than I was. And that was a really great experience. But I was there for long enough that I thought, all right, I love this. I don't know what comes next, but I think a master's degree would come next. And then I started researching master's degrees and master's programs and talked to my mom a little bit about them. But, and she said, well, apply to the U of A, Arizona. And also Georgetown has an amazing program, but it's got both TESOL, which is Teachers of English to Speakers of Other Languages. That's TESOL. So it has a TESOL program, but also it's really well known for its sociolinguistics program. And you might be able to combine those interests there. So I applied to that. I applied to U of A, and then I decided and ended up at U of A, but still no interest in a PhD at all, because a master's in TESOL is a decent degree. It's usually thought of as a terminal degree. There's nothing really beyond it. But then in the 1990s, which was when I was in school, in grad school, I learned that there were second language studies and second language acquisition PhD programs that were starting to pop up. And I guess one had existed before the 90s, and the person who used to teach there was now at my university, and she and some other faculty developed a new PhD program in Arizona. And so I thought, well, my classmates like to talk about, just give me strategies for the classroom. All I want is strategies. And I'm thinking, yeah, but you're teaching language. How do you even know what you're teaching if you don't have a theory of language happening and theories of how language gets taught? You need the theory. So I was liking the practical kinds of classes too, but I loved the theory. I'm like diving in and thinking, this is amazing. And then I learned about the teaching of writing because I was a TA and I had to teach English 101 and I was terrified. Talk about imposter syndrome. I went crying, like sobbing to the director because I said, there's no way I can do this. I've never even taken a composition class. I don't know what one looks like. What do you do in the classroom? Right. Okay, I'm going to sit here. I mean, you can't do that.
Yeah.
So, oh my God, I was terrified.
Oh.
But it turns out I loved teaching writing, and I especially loved teaching writing to multilingual students.
Oh, nice.
So that became the kind of intersection of those fields was the TESOL stuff and the teaching of writing stuff. And I was one of the first actually in my university to bring those together during the PhD program. So when I learned that theory was really interesting to me and hey, they just started a new PhD program, I'm just going to go to it. That's all. I didn't apply to any other places. I just thought I want to continue. That's it.
Nice.
I didn't even know. I mean, this is just so yeah. It's so absurd that I have this mother with a PhD, right, in applied linguistics. And it doesn't even occur to me to talk through, like, what are my options? What's a PhD for? I didn't realize that at the end of a PhD, a very, very common outcome is you apply to an academic job as a professor. I didn't know that. All I thought was like, what's in front of me? Ooh, right. Fun, classes. I will take it. Therefore, I will take more of them by joining the PhD.
Nice. Well, no, but that's like you're the epitome of an example of being in the present. Like
yes,
the present, then the future. Yeah.
Right. And yeah. Well, kind of, yeah. I mean, it's like, ooh, shiny.
I like what you
know. A few years after you were in my class, Karina, I taught a new class. It was called English as a Global Language. And because I was really interested in how many varieties of English there are all around the world and why if somebody is from Nigeria and they come to the U.S. to go to college and somebody tells them, oh, well, you need an ESL class. I'm like, what? No, English is this person's primary language, for God's sake. So what are the ideologies that are there's a hierarchy of varieties of English. And I thought that would be an interesting thing to do. And it was an undergrad class, but I had Daniel Wilbur in that class, who was a graduate student, who I mentioned to you. Daniel was really wanting to take pretty much everything I taught. And I thought, but this is an undergrad class and you're in the master's program. I don't think you're allowed. But we figured out a way that he could take a graduate credit. It was called English like 585 or something. It was sort of selected topics, like the super generic number that then the goal would be he would sit in on my class, he would take the class, but then he would also do an extra very grad-worthy kind of project where he taught a class on the most difficult of the theories that we were looking at. But he was in a group, and at the end of the semester, the students were, it was one of those days where I bring in like big sheets of paper and lots of markers, and you had to draw the 5 key concepts from the class and then figure out how they're related to each other, and then draw a visual representation of those relationships. You could draw a monster, you could draw a tree, you could draw a typhoon, you could draw people dancing, you could draw like whatever metaphor you could come up with, draw it. And so Daniel's group happened to have a student in it who is a really good visual artist. And each of the groups had to present their posters, these little temporary impromptu posters. And it had like a two-faced person in the middle of the poster paper. One face is looking right, one face is looking left. The one on the left is looking at the globe. There's the world. We love all the languages. Everybody who's multilingual is wonderful. And there's that kind of thing. And then the one on the right is a picture of the squirrel from the movie Up, where the dog, Doug, the dog, is there. So she draws this photo of the dog, a drawing of the dog, a really good likeness. You could tell immediately what movie it was. Doug and a squirrel. That was a very realistic looking squirrel.
Oh my God.
And they're presenting this. I'm like, what in the world did you draw? And so Daniel was the one who presented the poster to everybody and said, if anyone is around Gail long enough, they will know that she's a frequent user of the word squirrel to note when she's gotten off the topic. Squirrel, and then come back.
That's awesome.
So I still have that picture in my office, hanging up in my office,
Yeah.
But that's the Kairos thing that I was telling you that you read about. So Kairos is basically like a little mythological god or something of opportunity. Like the window of opportunity is open. Kairos is depicted as having long hair in the front, bald in the back. So when you look at old, carvings and things of Greek mythological figures, this one is bald in the back. Why? Because if you miss your opportunity and you reach out and you try and grab the opportunity, but if you miss it because you're too late, your hand is going to slip off his head and you will have missed the opportunity. Get it?
Yes.
I know. So Kairos, Daniel was the one who introduced me to Kairos. Well, his professor, my colleague, Kelly Myers, introduced me to Kairos, but I had only watched one presentation of hers. Daniel was taking her class while I was supervising his master's degree, basically, and he was doing an internship with me. And he said, Kairos seems to be operating when I watch you try and make changes on this campus.
Oh.
Like you see a moment and you grab it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, they're doing an institutional review committee for international students. Who's doing one for refugees? We better start something.
Yeah.
So it's sort of this like very ADHD way of going, oh, there's a thing. Let's try that. And if it's not the right time, it might fail. But then you can go, okay, wait a minute. I still have that idea in my head. I have to figure out something to help refugee students and immigrant students on this campus. There's tons of stuff. The TOEFL, like I was mentioning before, that's specifically infrastructure for international students. Nothing for refugees. Yeah. There's a camp program, which is for migrant farm workers who are largely from Mexico and some from Guatemala, mostly from Mexico, right? So the camp program exists if you fit that category, but there are a lot of immigrants who just happen to come later in their lives or from other places or something like that. And lots of refugees were starting to come. Yeah. And so, they had been coming for a while because we've had refugees in Idaho for a long time, but I thought nobody's doing anything for them. And I'm supposed to be the English language support person. Why am I not focused on them? Okay. So it was sort of like that idea had to come to me at the moment. Somebody else came up with the idea of this review committee that says, what things are we doing for international students now? And so then I think, okay, who would I bring to the table to really make sure we are actually serving refugee background students in any kind of an ethical way? And so it was the director of admissions, because students were getting in from American high schools who had relatively high GPAs, but their standardized test scores were super low. Right. So they had developed a spoken proficiency enough to be able to do well in their high school classes for the last 2 years, let's say, of high school. And then they scored super, super low on these standardized tests. And then they're getting into the university for their GPA, not for their test scores. I'm not an advocate of test scores, but I still know that if you are English proficient enough to be able to handle college courses, those test scores are probably going to be a little higher. But they were getting in with super low scores. So I thought, all right, admissions, you need to know who you're admitting. We're admitting people who then fail out of college, and that's not ethical to bring them in when we don't have the resources to work with them. We don't have any way of identifying them. So I've now been working with that. It's that committee, director of admissions, somebody from the TRIO program, which serves underrepresented students who are largely first-generation college students. A lot of refugee background students go to the TRIO program.
Wow.
We brought in people from academic advising who sometimes work with students who are on probation to try and kind of get them on the right track. Pulled all these people in a room together and said, all right, what do we do? Here's the deal. This is what's happening. And Daniel observed all of those meetings over the course of a full year and did one of his, major master's papers on that committee. He got permission from the director of admissions to record those meetings and write his paper about them.
Wow.
I know. It was so great. But I wouldn't have thought to do that if that other person hadn't come up with the idea of a review committee for international students, who don't count, like refugee and immigrant students don't count as international students.
Yeah, and that's so interesting.
Yeah, it's an institutional designation depending on visas. Right. Well, the reason that they don't is that most people in the United States believe that other people in other countries don't speak English and everyone in this country does. And therefore, if you graduate from a U.S. high school, then surely you're fine for college, but right. So it's a monolingual belief about how language works in countries.
Okay, and so that clicks a little bit more. Yes, it clicks because monolingual was like constantly repeated in the interview that I read through, and it stuck with me, but it didn't like really hit. Like I understood it, but now I understand it. So now I get it. I get it. Okay, wow, that's true. Yeah, it is. It's
and in fact, I've written a lot of papers about how monolingual ideologies have shaped the way institutions are structured. Like why is there an international admissions office that is different from the admissions office? Because it's assumed that international students are going to be non-native English speakers and need to have their English proficiency tested. And of course, there are other things like visas and things that they have to be operating. But the assumption is that the director of admissions is only for domestic students. And those students surely must be all fluent in English because English America.
Right. Absolutely. Right. Wow.
Right.
And I would have never thought that. Like, that's so fascinating because now I'm going to be like, did you know in the admissions? Like, it's monolingual.
In so many places. It's like how teachers are taught. And professors learn if somebody is not a native speaker of English in their, let's say, chemistry class, then if they're struggling in your class, it's not my responsibility, the chemistry professor, it's that responsibility over there in the ESL department or something like that. So it ends up kind of removing those students from people's minds about who they're creating their class for. So most professors in the United States are imagining that their students will be native English speakers, and if they're not, they need help from somebody else, not them.
Wow.
So, So there's a lot now that is written about that. And certainly there was stuff being written about that even around the time I graduated in 2001. There was stuff earlier than that. But I think in the last decade or two, especially, there's been more and more research on how those ideologies shape the way students are served in educational settings. So it's been fun to be part of that, actually.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And so talk a little bit about the process then. So now we've identified, you've really identified sort of where maybe the holes in the process are. And who needs to be served. So how are you able then to help them in that?
No idea. No, not really. I mean, so, a number of things that I've written and spoken about in academic circles are about where those holes are, and also about why it is that every professor in any institution of higher ed needs to be imagining the room as multilingual from the get-go. So working with faculty is a lot of what I do, trying to get that message out to faculty, how to get that message out in a way that's not going to tell them you're doing it wrong. Although sometimes that's my impulse, really. Like I went to one meeting one time with a very, very good friend of mine who is also a colleague. She's not a specialist in multilingual students, but she is really good at talking to people about writing and how to help people develop as writers. So she and I went to this meeting, and I knew the meeting was going to be hard because there were people in another college who were saying, these students can't write. Like, oh no. What? Because they're missing a the, or whatever, It turns out that this one professor showed me this piece of writing that really was hard to understand, but it was very, very simple words. And so if you just gave it a little bit of time, you'd figure out what the student was trying to say. The problem was his assignment to get that student to write whatever she wrote was a terrible assignment. It was like, list these things and say why and explain why or whatever. Nobody actually writes like that. That's a test, And so it's not helping somebody develop for writing in that field. It's just like regurgitate stuff. And she couldn't regurgitate it in a way that made sense to him. So he's like, look at this terrible stuff. So I'm like, already on edge when I walk in, and I'm thinking, okay. And so I could hear my voice rising. I'm like, oh, this is terrible. Luckily, my friend was there and she's like, well, so let's think about this. She's so much calmer than I was. And after the meeting was over, I said, God, I just hate when I hear things like that. And she said, yeah, you were locked and loaded. I was ready. I went in ready.
Right. Guns ablazing, just ready.
Best moments.
It's just the passion coming out. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was talking at the same time. Say what.
Oh, no. It was your passion coming out, and some, for some it might feel like bullets, but it really is. You're wanting to make sure that they're represented, and somebody who is just not taking the time to get the needs of the student. Just because they're in college doesn't mean that they still don't have those needs, and tailor that assignment to where you can meet them at their level.
That's right. And you can, lately the years have gone by, but when this started, since this started, but there's a philosophy, basically an approach to teaching called universal design for learning. And universal design is usually thought of as something to give access to people with disabilities to spaces where they wouldn't otherwise have access. So accessibility issues are usually embedded in universal design. But universal design for learning means you're going to have students who are older and terrified. You're going to have students who are people of color who, came in with like already thinking that the phrase is stereotype threat. They're thinking that I have to prove myself because you're going to think that I'm not good enough because of all kinds of disparities, right? Mm-hmm. So if you imagine a huge range of types of diversity, racial diversity, ethnic diversity, language diversity, ability diversity, neurodiversity, right? Gender diversity. If you have all of that in your head, there are kinds of flexibility that you can embed in the way that you teach so that everybody has access, And so trying to get faculty who've been often taught, not even taught to teach, right? They're taught to do research. And so sometimes they are, but not always. And so how do I talk to them about, language diversity when in their minds is this monolingual ideology? If they can't handle native English speaker English, then they shouldn't be here, right? So how do I handle that? How do I handle, these, the kind of ideological differences and then also pedagogical differences, how people know anything about teaching. Working with faculty has become a major emphasis of mine. And then also figuring out what those structures are, where people aren't being served. Like, is it the admissions office? I mean, now the current director of admissions is a godsend. She is so wonderful. Because she has, it clicked for her. She's like, oh, then what do we need to do? So she's become this huge ally. So finding those allies is often a matter of kairos. There's somebody who's now been to 3 of my workshops on teaching in linguistically diverse environments. I bet I could reach out to that person and see if we could collaborate on something. Oh, nice. So, that's how I've sort of built the network, is finding who are the allies, who can I work with. It's less about finding the gaps, because I know one of the gaps is an ideological gap, right? But who can I work with to kind of fill those gaps? Because, I'm just by myself in my little English language support office. I mean, for the last several years, I've had somebody who is, I've had an assistant for a while. She was part-time, then she became full-time, and then she retired, and a former student of mine stepped in temporarily. So we'll see if I can actually find somebody who can fill in full-time and permanently. But, and now I'm realizing I could actually have students as interns, because it's hard to think about that. But when I find somebody who's amazing, who says, what can I do? How can I help? I'm like, ooh, let's figure out a way.
Exactly. Well, okay. So I'm going to go a little kairos here, because when you said
you're going to go kairotic.
Thank you. When you said that your current gal, that's your assistant right now?
It's a man. Yeah.
Excuse me. I'm always there we go. That thinking it's always a female. So he's not going to be there for very long. He's moving on, or?
No, it's that the position was set up temporarily because we've been in a budget crisis, and I hadn't received permission to have a full-time permanent position. Because when I came, I was it. And then I eventually hired somebody who could coordinate tutoring, one-on-one tutoring between tutors and students who needed help. She eventually, when she retired, I had to fill in her position, but we were in a budget crisis. So I had to plead with the dean to get somebody temporarily, because if we don't have anybody, these students are going to fail and lots of them are going to go away, and I need help. And so I had a really wonderful, talk about allies, a wonderful conversation with the dean of my college, who is the chair's supervisor. And she is really also an ally. And I was able to make the argument to her that this is part of an equity issue, that if you're really interested in diversity and inclusion, you have to be thinking about language diversity, because most of the students who are multilingual are not white. So it doesn't look good for the university if we're kicking people out because we don't have services having to do with language. So, it seemed to have made a difference, because she has approved, for now she's approved it, but I haven't yet filled the position yet, because I have to work out HR things. I'm in the middle of that right now. So, but the guy who is my former student, who's my temporary person, has just been phenomenal. And, he'll be a good candidate for this position when it becomes a permanent position. But I have to I can't just hire him as much as I would want to. I just it would be so much easier if he doesn't, and I can continue working together. We work great together. He's brilliant. He's very thoughtful, and, but I have to make sure that I'm not just like, I'm giving opportunities to people who might be from a different place, might be from a different background, who, I need to make sure that I make it a big enough search that it doesn't look sort of, I don't know. I was going to use a word. What's
you've
that?
Got someone already set.
Right, exactly.
You want to leave it open?
It's a done deal. Yeah.
Well, even though, that's separate, but if there's something volunteer-wise or just something else that I would love to help and jump in, because I could, learn a lot. And then I'm a dual language person, as well. My first language was Romanian.
Right.
And so there's that too, that maybe I can just help provide that support that you're looking for. That
be awesome. Let's keep thinking about that. What that would look like. Yeah.
So I just want to put it out there and say, hey, if you're looking for people to kind of support or volunteer or whatever it is to create that base and community, just know I'm a big fan. So
thank you. Thank you.
Language is something important to me too. So, I know I would love to know and learn more about, because it makes me think of when I was teaching in Twin, there was quite a bit of a refuge population there too. Mm-hmm. And when I was teaching English at Canyon Ridge, the refugees that I had there, I did the best of my ability to try to help them with that dual language, right? Mm-hmm. And so I tried to make assignments to where, okay, write it first in your language, then try to translate it in English and see how that works. And just do work? It was challenging for them, and I don't know if that was the right thing. I was just grasping at straws, right. but I always felt like, what, how could I do more? Mm-hmm. How could I do better? I just didn't have that sort of thing. And I still have my teaching license and that sort of thing. So I would love those type of strategies, even to learn or to help and be in there. Because I just think it would be just awesome to have in the toolbox, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know anything about working with refugees, even though I have a PhD in second language acquisition. Why did no one tell us? No one in my training, in all those years of training, said anything about working with refugee populations. I had to come to a refugee resettlement city in order to start learning things and be here even for a while. I was here for a while before I realized it. So I would love to talk to you more about that. Right now we don't really have people coordinating volunteers, but there are always things to do. There's always things to do, because I'm just me and Heath, my partner in crime. And I do have an intern right now who is a former student. Well, I guess she's my current student. She hasn't graduated yet, but she's one of our tutors. But I think that there's always room once I have somebody with me, working with me, like Heath is right now, I really feel like, okay, they can kind of help me think about where are those places that people could join in and learn this stuff. And I think once you learn certain things about working with refugees, it just sort of, it's like it gets in your heart, I'm like, oh, I need to help. I need to do something, right? Yeah. But also then you realize, whoa, you're amazing. I get to write a letter of recommendation for a student who came here as a refugee when she was about 9 or 10, I think. And she's now in a fellowship program that, oh my God, I want her to be like a diplomat, go to law school. I want her to do all kinds of things. And man, she just tells it like it is. Yeah. She's, one of the few women who wears a hijab who is in the Political Science Association, and yes. She's like, she knocked on doors for the mayor when the mayor was running for mayor. And
wonderful.
I know, she's amazing. So I'm like,
wonderful.
Okay, I can hear her and I'm not thinking, oh, you poor thing, you were a refugee, right? This sort of charity case kind of thing. I have learned I need to be working with people who have that background so that then I can learn things. And they already know, like, they have so many resources and smarts and skills and all kinds of things. So now I'm the faculty advisor for what used to be called the Refugee Alliance, a student organization. But then they changed the name a few years ago to the Multilingual Student Alliance because they thought, we're not refugees anymore.
Yeah.
Like, why do I think the word refugee is turning people off. I'm like, oh, okay, well, let's have a debate about it. Let's figure it out. So with Multilingual Student Association, Alliance. And and I love them. And I see them like just doing all kinds of amazing things, just making relationships with people and going and speaking at some, thing, some event. And some of them are part of a local city level refugee speakers bureau that actually now is operated by somebody who works for the Idaho Office for Refugees, which is a statewide thing. But the speakers bureau really sort of started in the mayor's office. So it tends to be just Boise. But they're awesome. So if you ever want to learn anything about refugees, from their own perspective, then go to a speakers bureau event. They will have them. There are cooking classes, by the way.
Ooh.
And they're on Zoom now, which is so awesome. I mean, it's expensive to have, you get enough ingredients to make the thing. Yeah. You might have to go buy raw meat yourself so that they don't leave it on your doorstep or whatever. It's raw meat. So I've been to one on cooking Laotian or Lao spring rolls, egg rolls.
Yeah.
So they're deep fried egg rolls. They're like egg rolls that you would get in a Chinese restaurant, but the sauce is a little bit different and some of the fillings are a little bit different. And we learned how to make them. I'm like, oh my God, we could sell these. This is amazing. And it was all done on Zoom. So chef was, she's starting this really cool Idaho Museum of the International Diaspora.
Wow.
She's got some funders. She has architects designing, offering designs, and they're going to bid on things. And so it's, in the ground stages or whatever the phrase is, in its early stages. But she's just this very accomplished person, and she's Lao, and she taught this cooking class. And so she's on a Zoom camera. We're all, logged into Zoom. And most of us have our cameras off while we're trying to cook, but we're watching her and going, hey, can you lift that up so we can see in the camera better? It's awesome. I made Venezuelan arepas, and which are sort of like a bread, like a really thick tortilla kind of. Yeah. And so far, that's all I've made. There was another one that was a kind of, I think, now I can't remember. Something that was Kenyan. So the woman who led the class was Kenyan. She's also the leader of the Refugee Speakers Bureau. She is this lovely, extraordinary woman. But she's married to an Ethiopian man. So I don't know if she taught cooking classes that were for to make Indian food, because there are a lot of Indians who settled throughout different parts of Africa. So whether it was Indian or Ethiopian. I'm not sure because I didn't get to go to that one. But
Right.
anyway, all of this is, there's lots of fun things that you can do. If you wanted to join one of those cooking classes, basically you pay $25, you go down to the Idaho Office for Refugees on a certain day, you pick up all your ingredients, you go buy your raw meat if there's raw meat required, and then you tune in at whatever time it's usually on a Saturday. It's super fun.
Oh, that sounds well. And then in what you were sort of describing in what she was doing with the word diaspora.
Yes.
The word diaspora. I first heard that word on a podcast, and I think you may know this podcast or know one of the authors at least, Sarah Kendzior and Andrea Chalupa.
Yes. I don't listen to podcasts typically, but I follow both of them on Twitter.
I do too.
So they will quote from Gaslit Nation.
Yes.
Oh my God, they're so good.
Yes. I listened to the podcast Gaslit Nation, and then I also ordered her book Hiding in Plain Sight.
Good. I haven't ordered it. Have you read it yet?
Yes. It's true. There is a cadence that she has. You will love it. Oh my goodness. No, you have to read it because
okay.
The language and how she uses to describe is just really, it's well done. You enjoy reading it. It's like you're getting passionate and angry with the information, but the way she's writing it, like you feel it's kind of lyrical almost.
Yeah. Have you heard her speak?
Yes.
Oh, yes, of course, because podcast. She's like, she talks a mile a minute and she doesn't take a breath and everything is perfectly articulated.
Yes.
Like how does anybody do that?
I know.
Yeah, she's amazing. She's truly brilliant.
Yeah, I agree. And her co-star on there, Andrea Chalupa, because she also has a sister whose name starts with an A as well.
Sometimes Alexandra Chalupa.
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen both of their names.
Alexandra Chalupa worked for the DNC, and she was the one that tipped the DNC off in the Obama administration about what was going on with Russia and the possible interference in the 2016 election. And then she was targeted and actually had to exit the DNC. And they talk a little bit about that on the podcast too in the beginning. And so even to this day, they brought up her name in some of the hearings that were had on Capitol Hill, like she was somehow an accomplice, trying to project, of course, and on there. But Andrea was the one that used diaspora often, and the way that she would say it, diaspora. And she has a tendency to repeat herself. She doesn't realize sometimes. I need to tell her. I don't need to call her very accomplished. Hey. Yeah. Like I just enjoyed hearing diaspora. So when you mentioned it here and with the gal from Kenya and her cooking and it just made me think of that. And I just like that the sound of that name, the sound of that word.
Right.
Because I don't know.
I've never seen, there's an adjective version. The adjective form of that is diasporic. Oh. So I only learned that recently, actually. I'd never seen it in writing before. Yeah. I don't know why. I just hadn't. But I've been thinking a lot about global mobility and thinking about how it's always been a part of human life. Always. It's not just immigration is a recent thing or whatever. It's always been there. And so there's a Chinese diaspora, there's a Jewish diaspora, there's an African diaspora, and there's an Indian diaspora, there's an Arab diaspora. Yeah. It's really interesting to kind of chart how those movements around the world have shaped how we are, today. And so, it's just very interesting. All of it.
Well, and even what you're describing made me think of the movie that she made, Mr. Jones. It's streaming on Hulu. So if you have Hulu, I believe
no, it does.
Use the login information.
Yeah, right.
I'm waiting until my kids finally will flip it and then they will pay for everything and I'll just use everything else.
Right.
I'm waiting for that day. When will it come?
I don't know, because it hasn't come to me yet.
It hasn't,
Although,
right?
no, it did just order. I said, hey, Noah, would you order dinner? Do you have DoorDash? Oh, yeah, I have DoorDash. You have DoorDash? Okay, fine. So it's so funny.
I know. I love it. I do. Now I just kind of throw it out there. So who's grabbing something? Oh, hey, when you're at Winco, will you just get me a half and half?
Grab us something?
Oh,
yeah,
just, and then I avoid doing, I'll transfer the funds. I'm just like, hey, I
don't avoid it. I just transfer them.
It's like I'm undertowing silently saying, like, I changed your diaper for so many years, like I have carpal tunnel. Exactly. So I try to throw it in there too. But Mr. Jones that's a really fantastic film, also about World War II, and it goes back to what you were saying earlier about how that language, when we look in history and how, the groups that came, and here it's how they used language to normalize normalcy bias.
Yes.
Because Sarah Kendzior talks about that in her book as well.
That's right. She's still talking about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how, language is sort of used to do that. And it's interesting, like learning that, because now you can catch it when it happens. And even now, since the at the Capitol Hill with the riots, you can see even certain parts in the media how they avoid, using either certain words. And that was always common before. Mm-hmm. But for me, what has stood out recently quite a bit too is how they the language is used almost to say it's okay of what he's doing in terms of, well, he's going to go on a trip to Texas. Well, wait a minute. We're talking about impeachment. Why isn't the focus being put on impeachment and removing him? Why are you using language to project him into action of what he's going to do? Mm-hmm. Thus, this doesn't matter right here. This isn't happening, or it's not going to impact him. So this big thing is happening, but the language is projecting him into what's it called? No type of accountability, really. That accountability aspect. So I find that fascinating.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I know. There's so much of that. And I think the media are starting to reckon with that, kind of reconcile that. Not necessarily because there was just that stupid thing that I'm sure you probably saw somewhere where this guy whose name I have blocked out, I guess, who wrote some kind of an op-ed piece about how Dr. Jill Biden should not use doctor because she's not a medical doctor. She's never delivered a baby. I mean, what kind of stupid, a psychiatrist had probably not delivered a baby either. I mean, it's just so stupid. So clearly this unwillingness to see his own bias there. And I think many in the media are starting to see, okay, what did we not see coming? Why is this a shock to us? Mm-hmm. And other people are like, hello, we've been telling you for years. And so I think more and more, especially with the, events of last week, that I think I'm hoping that there will be some kind of change and a kind of reckoning that will happen as a result of that.
I hope so too. And I'm going a little bit off topic here because I'm curious about how is it for you, or how did you feel, or what was, your experience when you kind of came across those headlines and kind of was starting to see the videos of them just going in, or the gates being opened and being sort of led in. Talk about how did you experience that?
I think that I came across headlines first. I didn't see it as it was unfolding exactly. I don't remember exactly what kinds of headlines I saw. I did hear that there were, I knew that there were going to be all these people who were like, stop the steal people. We've seen here in Idaho, we've seen, them in public places. And so I'm like, oh God, these stop the steal people. And I knew that it was going to be happening on the day that the Electoral College was going to be certified. But I just thought it was just going to be a big protest and like the stupid protesters,
Yeah.
And then, so I was paying some attention. And then when I hear somebody was killed, and then I hear, where are the police or something like that, like then I started to pay more attention to it over the course of the day. And I think it was not shocking in some kind of way because I knew, I've known about racism and white supremacy for decades. It's not, that's not a new thing. It's also maybe because of the kinds of classes that I teach and the fact that I am interested in language ideologies. I already also know that there are ways that people try and remove racism from them, like distance themselves from racism.
Right.
And so they don't see it happening. So if you say, but look, there's Donald Trump holding a black child. Like, what? You think that makes him not racist? What world do you live in?
Right.
And so I can see that racism as a whole system. And other people are thinking, no, that's just the KKK. And if you say, I hate X type of people. No, not how it works. So I think knowing also that I love, even though I hate it, I love the phrase toxic masculinity.
Yes.
I think it's a really useful way of looking at this hyper masculinity and misogyny mixed together and through it with like intersecting with racism.
Yeah.
And so I have been able to see that. I mean, I've lived in Idaho for 20 years. And so, I've seen it more here because, of course, I was out of the country. And then I was in Arizona, but I was in Arizona in Tucson, which is kind of a blue dot in a red state, like Boise. Yeah. So I didn't encounter that much, but I encountered it a lot here. And I remember my dear friend, Mary Ellen Ryder, who died in 2008 here. She was on the faculty here when I first arrived and when I was interviewing for the position. And when I came for my campus visit as part of the longer interview process, she said, I love it here. I have to close my eyes and ears around election time, but otherwise I love it here.
Yeah.
Saying basically, if you let the politics get to you, you're going to be miserable. So you can try and kind of block it out. So I already had a hint of that. I also knew about the Aryan nations up in the north. And in fact, when I said, guess what, Mom, I'm moving to Boise, she goes, oh my God, they're going to burn a cross on your lawn. Right. And now we see swastikas on the Anne Frank Memorial. Yes. Right. So she was not far off. But so I already kind of knew a little bit, but I've seen, the Trump flags, the Confederate flags around, the, people saying things like, oh, you're Jewish. How about, so Noah's first grade teacher saying, like they were making little dolls as an activity and they were looking into their ancestry, although the teacher called it nationality, which is not right. No, their nationality. All the kids in this class are American, right? By nationality.
Right.
But she meant your ancestry and your origins of your family. And so she said, well, when she told me about this little doll activity, like make these dolls, you're going to make them in class as first graders, you're going to sew them, and then you're going to fill them and then dress them in the country, in the costume a national costume of your nationality was her phrase for it. Yeah. And so she meant, your ethnic origins, come up with some costumey thing, and we're going to have a little doll parade, right? International doll parade or whatever. And so I said, oh, cool. Noah lived in Japan when they were 2 and 3 years old. We have all this fabric from Japan. I could sew something and, or bring it in or whatever. And she goes, no, I think it's really important for children to understand where they come from. So I was thinking more of the Jewish country.
Jewish country?
What's the Jewish country? I mean, seriously.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I know. You should laugh at it. It's ridiculous.
Jewish country?
So, one, do you have so little knowledge about how Jews they never really had a homeland? And so after World War II, really in the 1920s, and the land was divided up, that became the sort of designated homeland in Israel. But we have no connection to Israel at all. No one in my family was from Israel. We don't go back to Israel. That's not a thing in my family. It's Eastern Europe and the ghettos in Eastern Europe, because we weren't allowed to have citizenship in any of the countries that sort of made up that land. So there is no freaking Jewish country, lady,
Wow.
Oh, I know. So I'm like, it's not exactly anti-Semitism. It's just a total lack of knowledge.
Yes.
How is this woman a teacher?
Yes. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Right.
I kind of wish I would be there just to see her reaction, and you trying to
I know.
Very.
So there is none.
That would have been, oh my gosh.
Years later, actually, 3 years later, Noah had her again in 4th grade. Oh, I was so upset. Noah was upset. They were just crying the week before classes started, saying, you don't get to learn in her class. It's just hurry, do this, do that, and just mind-numbing kind of way of doing education.
Yeah, it's just following rules, kind of makes me think of No Child Left Behind.
Oh yeah,
right. I mean,
testing.
Yes, and I remember while I was getting my degree, because it was kind of still during that time, and I remember when it was implemented, and then seeing those children, grow up, and then once they arrived in high school. And then when I had to do guest teaching, as a part of it, or internship, it was very difficult for them to break outside of, what do I need to memorize? What do I need to think for themselves, particularly in the honors courses. I had a tough time teaching the students in the honors courses, and I didn't enjoy it because they were not willing to take risks. They did not want to. But on the regular classes, they were. So I enjoyed more the regular class because those students, they're like, I'm going to tell you what I think. They're already and so, it was easier to kind of guide them into being vulnerable in that way and taking those risks to think for themselves. And they weren't scared too much of the grade, because it's not about the grade. It's about you achieving sort of a sense of self. It really is getting that individual sort of think for yourself, and then be in
that's right.
How can you contribute to the collective?
Yeah, growth, development. What are you contributing to the world? I know I've come to realize, part of that conversation about being vulnerable is also a learning that my job is to teach humans. I'm teaching people. Yeah. I'm not teaching things. I'm not teaching content. I mean, sure, I'm teaching content, right? I mean, that's obviously part of it, but I'm teaching people. Yeah. And so if I learn that the one guy puts the covers over his head because he's really depressed, I'm like, come on, I'm going to do what I can to help you feel better and be able to not see yourself as a failure because you're having a hard time learning in a pandemic.
Right.
Really. Yeah.
No, it's true. It's so true. And when you say that, I love hearing that. I wish I was around that sort of environment, and because environment really impact me, and what I see being a visual is a process of my learning, and also being able to adapt and that sort of thing. So
Right.
being in schools where it was a rigor, but also you had to follow these, you had to be in class, and having that environment versus more of that, being able to see someone apply like what you're doing, with bringing that sort of understanding to the students. I really wish, I often reflect back, because I do that, even though I'm not full-time teaching or in the classroom. I always think back, like, what could I have done, better? What I wish I would have been more understanding in that way. Like, how could I have impacted that person a little bit better,
Yeah, but I bet you did. I think what I'm also seeing is that when people know what kindness is, right? They know what kindness is, and they respond well to it. We are all a product of our environments, right? And I mean, here I was, sorry, I'm going to stop this right now because I can hear where I'm going, and I think, well, what if this is like, this will be public at some point. So anyway, I was thinking, how can I reframe this? I too was one of those kids who I did everything right. I followed rules because I was terrified of breaking a rule, because then someone would get mad at me. And God forbid anybody should get mad at me. And so I got really good and I was good at memorizing things. I just did that well. I think everybody in my family did that well. So we memorized things, but could I think for myself? Could I read a piece of literature and find anything in it? No, I was terrible at that. So I got into Oberlin College, and, because my GPA was like extraordinarily high, because that's all I was required to do. And then I got there and I got my first C's ever, because they didn't ask me to memorize things. They asked me to apply things and analyze things and do critical thinking, and I didn't know how. So that first semester was so hard. The whole time it was really hard. I didn't speak. This is hilarious, given how much time I've been speaking right now. I didn't speak in a classroom until my junior year, ever. I never said a word. And then in my junior year, I started taking classes in anthropology. They were really small classes because, as you might imagine, anthropology is not a hugely popular major.
Right.
So they were small classes. Some of the classes were just sit and memorize and watch slides. Like you're sort of, yeah, those were hard. The classes that were about theory, the classes that were about language and culture, there was one on Middle Eastern cultures that I took. I know, by a guy, he was my advisor, and he married a Turkish woman, spoke Turkish, knew a lot about the region too. And so he created this course. So in those kinds of classes, that's when I finally started to occasionally say something, but boy, so, you get me now, and I'm thinking, all right, I want people to talk in class. But I also know people are shy. There are plenty of people who are just like I was. And I'm not going to force it, but I might create, I'm not going to grade participation on how many times you speak. Like, that's just terrible.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I'm sure, because you were one of the shy ones. You would not have wanted to speak. And so you wouldn't have gotten a good participation grade. So I had to rethink, what does participation mean? In fact, just the other day, I can't remember if you follow me on Twitter or not, but I did tweet it. I retweeted it. It's a blog post by somebody that I follow who is really one of the most kind and humane teachers. Like, they describe their classroom and they have a participation grade, but it's based on things like, did you help bring somebody out of the discussion? Did you create a study group? It's about how you contribute to the collective, just like you said. So it's that this person is grading. And I thought, oh, this is just beautiful. I love this. I'm going to steal it.
That's the best way to do it.
Well, awesome. We learn everything from people around us. We don't have a whole lot in the way of original ideas, I'm convinced. Because we have language. And language isn't original, you know.
Yeah. I agree. You were talking a bit about when you came to Boise, and it seemed like a good segue also in terms of the toxic masculinity and, your experience as a female. You know what I mean? In academia and your experience just, where you didn't quite see it or experience it in Arizona, I believe you said. And here, can we go a little bit deeper there and talk?
Sure.
I'd love to hear, sort of, because some women said they don't like you didn't in Arizona, and then others, and I think it's good to hear both, and then where everyone can sort of understand everyone's experience.
Yeah. So you mean about gender in particular and women in academia and stuff? Well, so interestingly, when I was in grad school, I had a professor who, on the very first day of class, said to all of us, "You will not call me by my first name. I worked very hard for this degree. You will call me professor or doctor." And so I knew that she had come up in a generation where there were very few professors who were women, very few. And we already know that male professors are more likely to be called brilliant on their course evaluations, and female professors are more likely to be called sweet on their course evaluations, right? So there are these gender differences that are embedded kind of throughout the experience that people have in academia. But when I heard that, I thought, God, that's so rude to just say that. Aren't you all stuffy or whatever? But I'm hearing that again with this Dr. Jill Biden thing. And we also know that when there are multiple professors in a room and someone is introducing someone else, that women often get introduced by their first names and men get, this is Dr. So-and-so, and this is where the conflict comes in. I was telling you about how I kind of grapple with these competing belief systems sometimes, like, why is this? But I also think this, I have cultivated, I guess, not intentionally, although, I've cultivated this very interpersonally strong relationship with students, this interpersonally driven way of teaching. What that means is that I'm falling into the gender trap of the really nice, nurturing, caretaking professor.
Oh, wow.
Is the woman, right? And so I don't want to fight against that, but I also do. I want to be recognized as a professor. I'm not Mrs. Shuck. Don't call me Mrs. Shuck, right? That's the worst one because, one, I'm not married anymore. And two, it assumes that I'm married to a Mr. Shuck and I'm not.
Right.
And, so it's just wrong on so many levels. But I also feel more comfortable being called Gail. And I don't know why exactly that is, even with the PhD. I had a student who was a grad student who was about my age or maybe even older. And she would call me Dr. Shuck. I'm like, come on, call me Gail. I'm younger than you are. She's like, no, you earned the degree. I'm like, okay, well, that's really interesting. But why do I feel so awkward about it? I think because doctor sets up a distance that I don't want. I think that might be why. But I sort of wrestle with the genderedness of that. But it also means, so going back to the earlier conversation about trying to nudge faculty members out of their monolingual ideology, that is already pushing against the grain, right? It's really going against the grain. The grain is a dominant one. The grain is language doesn't change and you're just not using it right, you know? And so then if I'm pushing against that and I'm a woman, I'm not going to be given as much credibility as male professors. Like there's a very, very famous scholar in my field who also shall remain nameless. He gets all kinds of like people just flock to him. He has fans. People take selfies with him. He has like 1 million as he hits the maximum of number of Facebook friends that Facebook allows.
Wow.
All the time. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Right. And he makes change. But, you know, I admire the hell out of him because he has been able to make change at the national level about how people think about language diversity. Like, you know, more power to you, but not really. Like, give some of us some. So I wouldn't have that kind of platform that he has. Partly, it's also a self-promotion thing. If you're a self-promoter, that's going to happen. There are women who are good self-promoters, and they get that, you know, that kind of recognition. I don't really, because I'm just not a self-promoter. I'm going to make sure that multilingual students on my campus are served well. My entire life, that's what I'm going to focus on. Right. That's, I mean, other than obviously, you know, family and personal kinds of things, but academically, that's what I want to focus on. If I never publish a ton, fine. If I don't go to all the big fancy conferences, whatever. You know, if I don't get big research grants, fine. I'm just going to do my thing at my university and make allies. And, you know, that to me matters more than anything. And to some people, you know, you got to shoot for an R1 university, meaning like a research intensive kind of university, like a Harvard or a Princeton or something. I'm fine not doing that because I'd rather just have my little space that I'm trying to make better.
Well, and that's the tough part is that it seems like we're not allowed to be okay and be happy with what we want and satisfied and content where we are or what we think. It's like it has to follow these things, almost like there's the pressure because, well, being a female, we're already underrepresented. Go represent us. There's that one aspect. And then it's like, there's no way that a woman can just be happy. There's no way a woman can just be content with, you know, just, you know, focusing on just refugees or, you know, enjoying doing creative, you know, small projects. No, everybody has to want to, you know, all these big things.
More. You need more.
Yeah. You know, yeah. And so it's just interesting. It makes me think of a new show that just came out, Call Me Kat.
I haven't seen it. I've seen little references to it on wherever it is, Netflix or Amazon or one of those.
Yeah. And she's a 39-year-old, the character is, and she's happy and content and isn't looking for a partner and but enjoys going out and being social and dating and that sort of thing. And it kind of hits that sort of that monolingual, but really, you know what I mean? That mono idea, if you will, of, you know, the mom really hits that sort of category of trying to get her married, trying to get her, you know, to dress a certain way. It's like fitting into norms. And if the norms are norms that put you in a lower position, that's one thing. If it's a norm that says you must be ambitious, and you don't feel like that fits you, then you're kind of breaking a norm. Or, you know, I mean, my very presence here in Idaho, where there's probably 1,000 Jewish people throughout the entire state, you know, that's breaking a norm in a way. But I also sort of like mentioning it, even though oddly, I don't feel Jewish most of the time. Because I was never religious. My parents are either atheist or agnostics.
I wasn't bat mitzvahed, I didn't have that. It's the ritual. I didn't go through all of that. So I don't really feel very Jewish. And if I go to a Jewish service at the synagogue, I feel totally out of place, except something feels so familiar. It's like the minor chords in the songs and like the beginnings of the songs. I know a few words and then I'm like, I don't know where everybody is. I don't know this song. I feel like an outsider, but at the same time, I also can kind of emphasize being Jewish in a space where I know I'm with people who are not Jewish. Mm-hmm. And then I want to sometimes it just hits me. It's like a part of my identity that gets emphasized in certain places and then diminished in others. Like my partner, he lives across town, but he set up a little office for me for a couple of weeks because I know it's so sweet.
That's
he's so freaking sweet. So Noah had their best friend from junior high on is a young man named Sebastian, who is like, I'm just grateful for Sebastian all the time. Aww. Sebastian was leaving Portland and driving to Indiana and wanted to stay with us. I'm like, it's like a pandemic. I'm not comfortable with that or whatever. So I insisted he get tested, that Noah and I get tested, and then I'm just going to evacuate for a couple of weeks. And so I went over to John's house, stayed at John's house, and he's like, well, you need a space. So look, I put a lamp here, and look, I put an extra, you might need a second monitor. Like, it was the nicest office I have ever had. As you see, I'm sitting in my kitchen. I don't have an office really, but he set that up, and there happened to be a mirror and a dresser in this office space. And he thought, well, you're not going to want a mirror behind you in a Zoom call. So I'll just this is all related to being Jewish, by the way. I'm almost there. He put a piece of cloth over the mirror. I'm like, no, you have to take that down because that means somebody died. That's what you do after somebody dies is you cover up all the mirrors. Like, I was never religious. I didn't grow up in a household where people did that. My mom didn't do that. But I knew enough to know, no, that means something. And I have somehow acquired that meaning. And no, we're going to take that down. I don't care if there's a mirror in the back of my Zoom camera.
Yeah. Yes.
It's really weird. That feeling of Jewishness is a sense of identity that it's not huge, but it's still in there, and as much as I can say, I don't even know what any of these songs are, these hymns and, at the service, I'm so uncomfortable with this. I still also feel some connection to it. It's so weird. Identity is really weird.
Totally. I understand that part. Growing up in Pentecostal, I'm not in that religion.
Really? Oh, wow. Yeah.
That there's parts of that still remain. And when you talk about, like songs and when certain songs come up, I feel that what you described, like that touch, that pull. Sometimes things remind me of my grandma because she was very zealot Pentecostal and very, very, and so, I think of her and the stifling that religion just really caused just the family. And it makes me sad because there was such potential for creativity there. I just remember that. I remember that being a kid before conditioning kind of took over. There was that space, where you're like, your mind's creative and you're free of all of those constraints and you're a rebel and you're expressing your mind before you're conditioned in a different direction and all of that.
So interesting. Do you remember that happening, that kind of conditioning and say, no, like
very much.
Yeah. Yes. What was that? What did that look like? Like sort of where did it come up?
It just came up like in every day. My very first was I was having a bad day when we went to church and I just was having a bad day for some reason. And I was like 3 or 4. I wasn't, and I'm
every
just
3 or 4-year-old has bad days.
Yeah. And I'm just turning around. I'm like, and I'm sticking my tongue out at everyone. And then I'm feeling cool. I remember how I felt. I felt like,
interesting.
I'm having a bad day and you suck. And I'm just, and I'm having at it. I'm like, I'm not taking BS from anyone in my little, 3-year-old body. When I got home, man, I got it.
Oh,
The first
wow.
thing that when I walked in the door, across the face, and that
must have been such a shock. Yeah, I bet you still like vividly remember it.
Yeah, and no words were spoken, and I knew why.
Wow.
And so that kind of led to when I was 11 and we went to Romania, and this is before communism fell. In 88, we went to Romania. We were in church, and the preacher of the church had 2 daughters that were sitting in the front because the kids stood in the front so they could show how good behavior, which was an extension of the family. Look how well behaved they are. The family's,
right.
This perfection. And they were talking, and I was so worried for them. I was like telling them, shh, you're going to get in trouble. I was frightened for what 11-year-old shouldn't worry about those things. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it had already been drilled into you how to behave and how not to behave.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's hard to undo because there's still those parts, but then there is a little bit of beauty in all of that, kind of like a very melancholy song. It reminds me a little bit of World War II, even because of the suffering coming out of the camps. And there's certain sweet moments in a lot of the research and the movies that I watched, just those little shiny moments of connection, of happiness, of beauty, of seeing that sunset, like in Not Man's Search for Meaning, or maybe it was in that one, or Elie Wiesel, his one of them too, because I taught them both, and sometimes now they bleed together.
Yeah.
But they talk about how beautiful the sunset, and there was such sweetness in that description. Like, it touched me because it felt like a melancholy song. Like you could hear it and feel, and just the beauty in that ugliness, you know? And so, and maybe that's a horrible, sort of comparison, because I cannot in any way say that, I have suffered in any way an inch of that.
But I think that we have to have space for those extreme emotions to come together. And actually, that's a very Jewish thing I've learned. And when I learned it, I don't think I was conscious of it until I saw the movie Schindler's List. I had avoided it for years. Like, that is just too much. I can't watch Nazis. I have to deal with Nazis like in everyday life. I mean, obviously not, right? But they're out there. So I know I don't need to put myself into the position of being traumatized. And so I avoided it. And then it was at the cheap theater here. And I thought, all right, you know what? I've never seen it. I like Steven Spielberg's, other things. So sure, I'll try it. Oh my God, it was such a Jewish movie. And I don't mean the content of the movie. I mean the way that memory and beauty and horror all live together. There was something about, like, memory was really a running theme throughout it. And the little girl in the bright red dress sticking out in this otherwise very, very dark, oh my God. I just remember thinking, okay, that's where those things come together. And when beauty and horror and sorrow and joy, like, they come together, and they're both always part of Jewish ceremonies. So, like, the breaking of the glass at a wedding, there's a, reference to violence. That's what that is, but, well, people have different theories about what that symbolizes, but it's the destruction of the temple. It's, destruction and war and horror and breaking and, whatever in a wedding. And you also make room in, like, my nephew's bar mitzvah. My uncle went to it, not my nephew's dad, but an older uncle, went to this ceremony, and it's just absolutely joyful ceremony, and the rabbi was the kindest person. Like he was beaming, and he sang lovely things and got everybody to feel good. He was just amazing. And I'm not even Jewish. I mean, like, you know what I mean? I'm not religious. I don't care about being part of a temple or a synagogue, but here he was, just this open, warm person, literally with his arms open as he walks in. I know. And my uncle was there, and my uncle was somebody in his life, and I don't remember who at that point. Oh, I think it was his brother. I think it was my other uncle that died recently. I mean, I'm trying to remember. So I remember when each of them died, but I'm trying to remember whether that was what was at the bar mitzvah. There's a place in the bar mitzvah service where the rabbi asks if anybody wants to stand and recognize anyone. And so you stand and you recognize people who are ill, people who have just died. So he mentioned my other uncle, my brother David, and I just sort of like saying, I want to say a prayer for somebody. But that's always woven in to weddings, bar mitzvahs, beautiful moments, the services that are supposed to be full of joy or something, celebrations, but those things come together. They're not separate. And so no matter who we are, no matter whether we've experienced, the kinds of racism and oppression, and, no matter what kinds of experiences, how much privilege we have, we can still, at least, as long as we make space for both those things, then there's, I think, I don't know, this sounds more profound than it is. I'm just making stuff up. But it's like when you make space for that, there's an opportunity potentially for reflection, to recognize, okay, I am trying to be a good person. Sometimes I'm not. And sometimes I'm selfish, even though I try and give and give and give. Sometimes I'm actually really selfish, or I work hard, but actually I really just want to lay on the couch.
Exactly. No, I love that because it's so true. It reminds me of somebody described in sort of a spiritual, which once leaving Pentecostal, kind of, again, returning to that inner child, that inner space that was talked about really us being that house. And that's a religious concept anyway, just the body being the house.
Right.
Everything you're describing is a part of that house. It's a, it's a knickknack on the counter. At the end table, it's the beautiful lamp that shines. It's the blanket on the couch, all of those. It's that lint on the floor.
It's all part of the same house. Yeah.
And that all of it can exist beautifully together. And maybe put some away, but then you got to take it out. We can try to clean the countertop, like of the feeling like selfish, but we got to put stuff on the countertop again. So it gets, it gets cluttered.
Right.
That sort of thing. So that's what it reminded me of. Really beautifully said, described.
Yeah.
But
thanks.
So I feel like I have taken so much of your time, and I would love to gobble up all of your time, but then I would be selfish on my part. So I want to respect your time as well. And I just want to thank you so much for being my very first guest.
What a delight. What a delight. It was my pleasure. Absolutely. It's so lovely to see you again and see you happy. And yeah, it's great.
Hey, thanks for hanging out. Remember to subscribe to Her Salti Words and give her 5 stars so that this podcast can grow and reach as many humans as possible. And if you could share, that would be awesome sauce. Last, check out Why You Gotta Be So Salty with an I in salty on YouTube. Click subscribe and like for future episodes. Thanks so much for your time, and I look forward to hanging out next time on Her Salti Words.